working? Okay. Hi, welcome. Thanks for coming tonight. We have 4 great speakers tonight that I am proud to introduce in just a moment after a few announcements. Unfortunately, our fearless leader, Scott Burkholder, is not here tonight. For his perfect attendance since the conception of the 9/12 Patriots, we gave him a night off. But we certainly miss him. What's that? He has perfect attendance. Okay, I have a few announcements. Fran, first of all, this will be our last monthly meeting until after the holidays. We'll meet again in January. We haven't set the date yet for that, so please check our website after the holidays for the date. It definitely will not be the first Thursday because that would be just following the new year. So please check the York 9/12 Patriots website after the holidays, and we will have a date for the January meeting. As you know, we're collecting donations, as we do every month, for the York Rescue Mission. They're having their fall food drive now. Please, when you come to meetings in the future, it's important that we support charities. We are very adamant about the government not being a charitable organization, so it's extra important that we show that we are. On Thursday, November 21st, the Independent Regulatory Review Commission is holding a meeting to vote on the approval of the Common Core standards for Pennsylvania. Fran Fulton was going to make a printout with the details of that meeting, but Fran's not here. So I will put the meeting on the website so you know more about it. But they are having... Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Better? You bet. Okay. Anyway, there is a meeting on the 21st in Harrisburg, and I'll post it on the website because I don't have the address here. People are going to be rallying at the meeting. You can speak at the meeting so long as you call ahead. They'll give you 3 minutes to speak, to weigh in. Your comments will be part of the public record, so this is your chance to be heard on Common Core. You can also email your comments or mail them in, and I'll put all that on the website for you. Again, if Fran shows up, she had made a printout to give out this evening with all those details. But we need as many people there as we can get. Okay. Do we have the Common Core T-shirts tonight, or we do not? Okay. All right. Okay. I'd like to begin tonight's meeting by thanking our guest speakers. First of all, for taking their time today to drive out here and attend our meeting, and for being on the forefront of this battle for the heart and soul of our nation and our state, and to restore some sanity to our state and federal government. They're on the forefront of this battle every day, and we really appreciate the work they do. Each of our guests will be given 25 minutes to give their spiel, and they can sort of divide it as they choose. So they'll give their thing, and then they can use the additional time to answer questions from the audience. Bill, is this going to be a microphone for the audience?
We'll line them up over here or something.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Bill will have a microphone. If you have questions, please line up for questions for our speakers. Our first guest speaker tonight is someone I'm proud to introduce. He's got to be one of the hardest working men I know. He wakes up in the morning with his guns blazing to fight the war on property taxes. He's done this for years and years, and he really gives new meaning to the word perseverance. I'm proud to introduce David Baldinger of the Pennsylvania Taxpayers Cyber Coalition.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Beth asked me to stop by tonight and give you an update on the Property Tax Independence Act. So I'm going to do this in three parts. First of all, let's talk about the Independent Fiscal Office report. Some of you may or may not be aware of a report that was issued last year in mid-September by the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office that analyzed House Bill 76 and Senate Bill 76, at that time 1776. They released another analysis on October 1st of this year. And immediately the opponents of the legislation pounced on it and said it underfunds education. So I'd like to just do a brief overview of the Independent Fiscal Office report, and we'll go from there. This is the bottom line on page 2 of the Independent Fiscal Office report, and this is what the opponents are using to say it underfunds education. The first line, 2014-15, right there, comes up $3 million short of fully funding education against $12.7 billion. It means we missed the mark by 0.0003%. How much closer to being on the nose can it come? What they're using to argue against the plan is when you stretch it out to 2018-19, they're saying we're short by $1.03 billion. Actually, that's how much is going to be saved by the implementation of the plan. Right now, property taxes are rising at more than 3 times the rate of inflation. Can't keep going that way. And one of the main principles of House Bill and Senate Bill 76 is to slow that acceleration in the increase in property taxes. Now, excuse me, I'm going to be reading some of the stuff here because I haven't given this talk before. The deficit reaches just over $1 billion, and they're using that as the argument against the plan, when actually it's the cost savings in the acceleration of education funding. Now, the net fiscal impact actually tells us, these numbers, tells us a couple of things. First of all, we're going to reduce the acceleration in the property taxes, but it's also a warning to us. The deficit amount each year, it's what's going to have to be made up if House Bill and Senate Bill 76 isn't enacted now. If the plan is pushed out and enacted later, let's say 2018-19, we're going to have to come up with another $1 billion at the state level to make this work. It's a warning that if we don't get it done now, we're going to have a tough time getting it done in the future. This is the second slide. What this chart shows, it starts in 1993-94 with everything at par, all the indicators at par. The first line, the blue dotted line, Consumer Price Index, a measure of inflation. And the lines I really want you to pay attention to are the CPI, the average weekly wage, the blue dotted line, and gross state product, which is basically the same as the gross domestic product, meaning it's a combination of inflation and increase in economic activity. The black line at the top is the increase in property taxes. All being equal in 93-94, look at the acceleration in property taxes compared to any of the other indicators. Let me find the numbers here. Since 1993-94, school property taxes have increased by 146%. The average weekly wage, 80% increase. The CPI, 59%. And you notice that acceleration is continuing. How much longer can this continue before the entire system crashes and burns? People right now are having difficulty affording their property taxes. As long as that black line keeps rising, we're going to have problems with it. The whole idea of HB and SB 76 is to flatten that black line and bring it closer to people's ability to pay and the increase in the CPI or the gross domestic product. Those who oppose the bill and say it leaves a shortfall are absolutely wrong. All we're trying to do is bring that down to where it belongs. Simply, the plan works. These are conclusions the IFO came up with. Now, these were in last year's report, but we had a meeting with the IFO about 10 days after they issued the report on October 1st. These particular items were not in the new report, they were in the last report, and I asked them specifically, do these still apply? Elimination of property taxes increases the disposable income of property taxpayers. The analysis assumes that 70% of the property tax cut goes to individuals, and further assumes that homeowners spend 90% of the increase in disposable income. We're talking for homeowners about $10 billion a year in property taxes injected right back into Pennsylvania's economy. The federal government borrows money as a stimulus. We have this stimulus handed to us simply by getting rid of the school property taxes. And think about it yourselves. How much are you paying in school property taxes right now? If that was put back into your pocket, what would you do with it? Likely, as they're saying here, 90% of it, you'd spend it and stimulate Pennsylvania's economy. Indicated home values will increase on average by more than 10% statewide. That restores a lot of the loss that came from the 2008 economic downturn. Regarding business entities, they're saying the income flows through to individuals as higher disposable income. For past due entities, the analysis assumes the owners and shareholders spend 90% of the increase, 70% is spent on taxable goods and services, and you get a secondary effect of another $34 million in sales taxes, which helps to fund education. He also said working-age homeowners realize a tax cut. Even though you'll lose the federal income tax deduction for property taxes, you'll still save more on the loss of the property tax than you'll ever spend in extra federal taxes or in sales tax or the income tax. And I'm assuming at this point most of you know how the legislation works and what its principles are. Retired homeowners realize a significant reduction in taxes. The analysis finds that the property tax reduction easily offsets any increase from the higher sales tax. Benefits also accrue to home builders, home developers, and other landowners who can convert current land holdings into new housing plots, increasing employment in the construction sector. And finally, this is the one I like best of all. The elimination of property taxes would significantly, and these are their words, reduce the property tax share and would clearly increase the attractiveness of the Commonwealth for business, location, and expansion. We are 48th in the country in job growth. This would help to bring new businesses to Pennsylvania and, in turn, the jobs that those businesses create. You would think that this seems like a no-brainer. 6 weeks ago, this was right beginning of September, the bill was brought up for a vote in the House. House Finance Committee, chaired by Kerry Benninghoff, refused to allow the bill out of committee. And I'm going to give you a timeline on this. 20th September was the Friday before the House returned to session. Just after midday on Friday the 20th, Chairman Benninghoff announced that there would be a voting meeting of the Finance Committee at 11 o'clock Monday morning. Now, people were sleepy after the summer break. It had been 2.5 months since anyone had been in the legislature. Nobody was really paying attention, and out of the blue comes this voting meeting. They voted 4 property tax bills out of committee. One of them was a constitutional amendment to increase the homestead exclusion to 100%. Another one was to allow school districts to swap from a property tax to a local earned income tax without having to go to referendum. The third was fixing up some minor details in current Act 1, and the fourth was House Bill 1189, Representative Seth Grove's property tax, the Optional Property Tax Elimination Act. They rammed them out of committee. 2 hours later, they were on the House floor and went through first consideration. So consider that for a second. As of Thursday, the General Assembly had been out for 2.5 months, very few people were paying attention. Everyone was still asleep at the switch. Boom, the bills come out of committee. They voted on the bills relatively early in the day before anyone had a chance to react, before there was any discussion on the bills, and no lawmakers had the time to confer or ask questions. They were on the House floor, went through first consideration. Now we fast forward to September 30th. It was obvious by the beginning of that week that leadership was not going to allow House Bill 76 out of committee. Jim Cox and a few of his colleagues decided the best way to handle this would be to attach the HB 76 language to Seth Grove's House Bill 1189 as a gut and replace amendment, as a way to get it to the floor, to force it to the floor for a vote. On Tuesday, they voted on second consideration on 1189. First thing they went to was the House Bill 76 amendment. There was such a heated discussion prior to floor session that day, the session started 2 hours late. The discussion took place in the Republican caucus. Obviously, I was not there, but those who were tell me that Majority Leader Mike Turzai was beating very hard on the House members to keep them from voting against the 76 amendment, which in the end they did. After 3 hours of floor debate, as a lot of Turzai's minions tried to trash the bill, they voted it down 138 to 59. What really irritates me about this is, and I heard from someone who was there, I don't know who else participated, but Mike Turzai was in the back of the House chamber actually high-fiving the defeat with some of his colleagues. What bothers me about this is this bill was written by the people in conjunction with the legislature. This is our bill. This is our legislation. They were celebrating the defeat of the taxpayers who worked so hard for this bill. They have actually become our enemies in a war to get this bill done. I'm going to give credit to those who fought so hard for the bill on the floor. There were those who did that, and I appreciate their work. But on October 2nd, Seth Grove's bill was voted for final passage and was sent over to the Senate. They accomplished what they wanted to do. For those of you not familiar with Seth Grove's bill, it calls for a local tax shift from property taxes to any one of 3 other taxes at a school board's discretion: a mercantile tax, a business privilege tax, or a local earned income tax. The mercantile tax is actually a tax on a business's gross receipts. Whether or not the business is profitable, they're going to pay the tax on gross receipts regardless. Business privilege tax is just a flat tax for the privilege of running a business. And the earned income tax is anybody who earns, actually it's an earned income tax or a personal income tax, and anybody who has earnings. This approach has been tried before. Act 50 and Act 72, they tried it at a school board's discretion. Very few school boards did it. It was tried again with Act 1 in 2006, but this time by voter referendum. Referendum was held in May 2007 to shift from a local earned income tax, from school property taxes to a local earned income tax. It was defeated in 494 of 498 school districts. 3 times this approach has been tried before, 3 times it's failed, and they're doing it again for one reason: to try to kill HB 76, the Property Tax Independence Act, and push through meaningless legislation. The beauty of this for the legislators is that if they pass it, they're going to be able to say, we gave you property tax relief. Oh, your school board didn't enable it? Gee, we're sorry about that, but we did our part, blame them. They can claim that they gave you property tax relief and remain absolutely blameless when it doesn't happen. Some of the arguments made against it: first of all, if you're a local business person and you could get slapped with the gross receipts tax, are you going to stay in that school district or maybe go to the neighboring school district with your business where there is no gross receipts tax? And imagine 500 different school boards all implementing different taxation structures, 500 different taxation structures across the state. Is this insanity or what? The bill does absolutely nothing, but the GOP House leadership, and especially Seth Grove, are the ones who are pushing this to try to defeat HB 76. As a sideline, the folks in the Senate don't even want to hear about it. I met with Senator David Argall last Tuesday, along with some other senators, and he said to me, you know, people are calling me every day telling me they want to get 1189 out of committee, very sarcastically. 1189 is dead in the House, despite what Representative Grove might tell you. So I just want to review the whole thing again. September 23rd, first day of the new session, the bill was shoved out of committee in a half an hour, was on the House floor for first consideration 90 minutes later. October 1st, the HB 76 amendment was defeated. Final passage, 76 was sent there October 2nd. It was HB 1189, Seth Grove's bill, was never subjected to any hearings. There were no studies done by any of the agencies in Harrisburg who do it. There was no floor debate. When it was shoved through the House, no debate whatsoever. Bring it up for a vote, debate was disallowed, shove it through the House and get it finished. It was never vetted in any way. Does this have a familiar ring to it? Except for the fact that it wasn't done in the middle of the night, this sounds like 2005 all over again in the pay raise. Shove it through the committee when nobody's looking, shove it through the House floor when nobody's paying attention, and screw the taxpayers. And this is exactly what we're comparing it to. This is the 2005 pay raise all over again. You'd think they would have learned a lesson from 2005. They haven't learned anything. But this isn't the end. Only the amendment was defeated. The base bill is still in the House Finance Committee and in the Senate Finance Committee, and I'll go on to that in a second here. The Senate is working it very hard. It currently has 24 co-sponsors. As you know, 26 is a majority in the Senate. Right now, we are working on amendments to the bill. The Department of Revenue issued a report back in June that said there were about 60 technical errors in the bill, which is kind of interesting because the Department of Revenue did the same thing last year and found nothing, and the bill's basically the same, but they found 60 this year. It's okay. We're working on the amendments. The The bill is going to be bulletproof. Senator Brubaker, who chairs the Finance Committee, is not a co-sponsor because he doesn't want to appear biased, because the bill is in his committee, but he supports it. And we have no doubt once this bill and its amendments are ready to go, Senator Brubaker will push this out of committee and onto the House floor. Let me see where I'm going here. Okay. Pennsylvania Association of Realtors is all in on this bill. They are working very hard to get it done. Oh, let me go over this. Sorry, I totally forgot that slide. Here's the York County votes on HB 76 and HB 1189 and whether or not they were co-sponsors. Keith Gillespie was a co-sponsor. He voted for the amendment. He also voted for 1189. Seth Grove, no on a co-sponsor, no on the amendment. He voted for his own bill, of course. Ron Miller, he was a co-sponsor, still voted against it, but voted for 1189. I don't know Regan. Anybody? He was a co-sponsor, he voted for it, he voted for 1189. Stan Saylor, who has always said and campaigned on the idea that he would support property tax elimination, voted against the bill. So did Schreiber, so did Will Tallman, and all voted for 1189. Now, getting back to PAR. Well, that's not where I wanted to go. Let me go over that one yet. How many of you are aware of the furor a few weeks ago in the York newspapers and radio? Carol, I see you raising your hand, about how Seth Grove was receiving threats and he had to have security at his town hall meetings. That's what caused it. Does anyone see anything threatening in that poster? In fact, I had one politician tell me it was a brilliant political maneuver. There's nothing threatening there. I'll give you the timeline on this real quick. Jim Rodkey of our 11 and 912 group posted this on Facebook back in early June. He had it up for 2 days. I got a call from someone in the legislature saying they were really getting angry about it. Take it down. Okay, I did it. It was gone for 3 months, and suddenly Seth posted it on his Facebook page, along with a link to Bon Jovi's Wanted Dead or Alive. It was dead. And he brought it back up 2 weeks later. He started calling news media complaining about threats. I got calls from the Daily Record, the Dispatch, and Channel 27. Jim Rodkey got calls from Channel 8, from Channel 21, and they all had one thing in common. Seth was the one who tipped them off to this. He spent time telling them about these threats, calling each of them to try to move the story. All over that. Now, on to PAR. They have a website set up, a Facebook page set up. They are pushing hard to get this bill done. They have lobbyists in Harrisburg. They have someone who's going out and giving talks on the bill all over the place. They are putting everything they have into this legislation. I suggest you go to their website if you get a chance, Real Reform 76, and if you're up for it, you can download a poster from there and send them a picture. It's all part of their social media campaign. They're getting folks from all over the state to send in these photos, and even someone's dog. Whatever you can do, go to their website or their Facebook page and participate if you can. They are doing a lot for us. We appreciate their help, and they're dumping a ton of money into this. Thank your local realtor for it, too, if you have a chance. They're all pitching in to help. The Apartment Owners Association is also on top of this. What I suggest you do, and they're also asking for stories. If any of you have any horror stories about property taxes or know anyone who does, on their website they have a place you can submit the stories. Please send in a story. This is one from York County. Finally happened, our monthly tax escrow has surpassed our mortgage payment. We'll never pay off our home. We have tax liens against our property, so we'll never have home equity. We can manage to pay just enough to prevent a share sale, but that's all we can pay. If you know anyone like that, go to the website, Real Reform 76, and have them submit the story. www.ptccus is the Pennsylvania Taxpayers Cyber Coalition website. There's a lot of suggestions on there on how you can help. It also has details on the bill. And please, if you have the opportunity, go there. This is a grassroots effort in conjunction with PAR. Now that they've joined us, after 10 years, we finally have a huge sponsor. This is a grassroots effort. If you can get involved, it's going to help. And that's all I have to say. I'll take any questions if you have any. Right in front. Yes, sir.
If you can come up here to ask your question, so then we can get. So If anybody wants to ask a question, please just line up over here. Make life a lot easier for everybody. And please, only questions.
Your first or second slide, where you had the deficits came up to $1,031 or 10.
1.031 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure I understand that. Would you go over that again for me?
Sure. What that means is that 1.031 billion, the fifth year out. What that's saying is the property taxes will increase by that amount in 5 years if we don't do something to control it. The baseline would be no property tax increase. This means it would increase by $1 billion, just over $1 billion in 5 years if we don't do something to control it. That was actually showing the total increase in property taxes. The IFO said a 16% increase in property taxes statewide over the next 4 years. That 1.06 is the number.
Add to that. Well, now, if that is a deficit, okay, that will happen if we don't eliminate the property tax. What kind of a tax is going to replace that? And isn't the real problem here the expenditure, not the taxation?
It's a combination of both, and yes, you're right, expenditures are a problem, and that's part of what HB 76 addresses. The original plan on HB 76 was to annual increases to the schools would either be linked to the increase in inflation or available revenue. That means the increases to the schools could not increase more than the rate of inflation, as opposed to right now, where they're increasing at roughly 3 to 4 times the rate of inflation. So yes, you've got to control the spending, and 76 looks at doing that by limiting the annual increases to the schools. That black line on that chart, instead of looking like this, flattens out. So the increases aren't as great to the schools each year. It looks to do both. Fact is, the system's going to crash if we don't do something about it soon. And there are those who said we got to get spending under control first. No, you don't. There's no reason why both things can't be done at once. And in this case, 76 looks at doing that. Can't do anything about the state level subsidy because we don't look at that in 76, but we do look at property taxes, which is the worst part of it. And I don't know how many of you can withstand a 16% increase in the next 3 or 4 years. It's gotten out of hand, and 10,000 people a year roughly lose their homes in Pennsylvania to sheriff sales, and that doesn't include the people who move and sell their houses just to avoid getting sheriffed. We got to get this problem done now. I'm sorry, I sort of expanded on that.
I have the microphone, so I get to talk next.
All right, Dan, have at it.
You expressed excitement about the Senate and the Senate passing this.
Absolutely.
Possibly. Okay. My question is, you showed a slide with the House of Representatives where several of the co-sponsors bailed.
Yep.
What's preventing that from happening in the Senate?
Absolutely nothing. And this is why we need the grassroots involvement to keep those senators strong. On the Real Reform 76 website, the Realtors website, there's a form there where you can send a letter to your senator. If they are a non-co-sponsor right now, it sends them a very nice letter asking them to co-sponsor. If they are a co-sponsor, it sends some reinforcement to them saying, thank you, please stay strong on the bill. The difference between the House and Senate, though, Dan, the House members, a lot of them signed on. You know this for a fact. No, in fact, Jeff Trish just told me about this earlier. Some of them signed on because it said property tax relief, whether or not they believed in the bill. And when push came to shove, they voted against it. The Senate tends to work with a different dynamic. They're a whole lot more contemplative about what they do. They don't sign on to bills easily just for political considerations. And I think for the most part, the Senate co-sponsors are going to be a whole lot stronger about staying with the bill than those we saw in the House.
Can I do a quick follow-up on that? The slide you showed was the York County representatives.
Yes.
Failed. Was that true across the state, or was that really just the buddies of Seth Grove that kind of...
About 30 of the, I think it was 26 of the co-sponsors bailed on it, but it was very definitely concentrated in York County.
Okay.
There was no question about it. And I think that was due to the influence of Stan Saylor and the influence of Seth Grove. I'm going to get ugly here for a second. Seth was handpicked to introduce House Bill 1189 with the intent of killing House Bill 76. He has lied right and left about 76 and how it works. He has lied about the benefits of his bill every chance he's gotten. He is doing what his leadership is telling him to do so he can advance his own agenda. The leadership is afraid of 76. I'll tell you why. Seth stands behind Common Core. Common Core has been estimated to cost $650 million statewide to implement. Right now, that burden is going to be put on local taxpayers through the property tax. We also have the pension spike coming. That is also going to be financed by local taxpayers through the property tax. HB 76 passes, that ends it. The school districts can't raise local property taxes enough to meet these obligations. It's going to kick it back up to the legislature and make them deal with it. They're the ones who should have dealt with it in the first place because they're the ones who messed it up. And the last thing the legislature wants to see is having to deal with both the Common Core costs and the pension spike costs because they're the ones going to have to raise taxes then, not blame the local school boards, and that's the last thing they want to do. This is why the House GOP, we're almost certain, is opposing the legislation, and Seth is a tool for the House GOP leadership to try to derail 76 and keep local property tax elimination from happening. I'm sorry, I got off on a rant.
This is going to be
If you get the idea I'm irritated with Seth, yes, I am.
This is going to be the last question for David then for the night.
Yeah, David, looking through the IFO, I'm still looking for the answer to the increase in the property taxes over that period up to 1819.
Yeah.
Isn't most of that as a result of the pension system costs?
No, in fact, when we met with the IFO, they didn't factor the pension spike into it to any great extent because at this point, they don't really know what it's going to be. They can't quantify it. That 16% over 4 years was just the anticipated increase based on historical figures. It did not include the pension spike. So the 16%, it could be a whole lot more than that depending on how the pension spike comes down and how much the school district's going to have to pay. I've heard estimates from others say over the next 5 years, 30% increase in property taxes. That includes the pension spike numbers. So, that was the last question? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Please do what you can to help.
Seth Grove and Bill 1189, that's what happens when we send people from puberty into politics with no life experience. Fran Fulton did show up with our handouts on the Common Core meeting. She's in the back, and she has some nice yellow handouts for you with the information on that meeting. Please pick one up on your way out. We want to get as many people there as we possibly can. Okay, next we have Leo Knepper of the Citizens Alliance of Pennsylvania.
Good evening. I'm going to try and move this so I can be heard by everyone. I'm the Executive Director for Citizens Alliance of Pennsylvania. For anybody who's not familiar with us, we do a lot of work both in training and recruiting candidates to run for House and Senate seats. I have put some information about the organization on the back table there, so feel free to get that. I guess there was a couple of things that I wanted to touch on quickly and then open it up more for question and answer from people. I wanted to focus a little bit on what's going on in the state legislature this year, as well as from now until to the end of the year, and also what we can expect kind of looking at 2014. Sad to say it, but we're already looking forward to 2014 because of all of the election opportunities that'll be coming up. My organization gets involved with primaries, so we will back challengers to sitting members of the House and Senate. I mean, obviously, we're fairly selective about who, what kind of situations we'll get involved with, but we actually were, very happy to get involved with a couple of races down here in 2012. We supported the primary challenger against Stan Saylor and also the gentleman who ran against Ron Miller. So very familiar with the area. So just to give you a little bit of background about who we are. So the first thing I want to talk about is you're probably hearing and seeing a lot of information about, or maybe not, I don't know. But the big push that's going on right now is for Governor Corbett's transportation plan, so-called transportation plan. Just to give you some ideas about what's happening with it, At this point, it's holed up. It's not actually going anywhere, and that's a good thing for taxpayers. Pennsylvania currently spends about $6 billion a year, over $6 billion a year, funding transportation. This particular piece of legislation would increase gasoline taxes by 28 cents a gallon over the course of a 3 to 5 year period, depending on which piece of legislation you're looking at. Not only would it increase gasoline taxes by 28 cents a gallon, it would also add a $100 basically surcharge onto any moving violation, and it would also change and increase the costs of all vehicle registrations. So everything said and done, you're looking at about $2.5 billion in increased taxes and fees over the course of a 3-year period. Governor Corbett's initial proposal was just the gas tax increase. And just to explain kind of how because people will say, the governor and other folks have said, well, it's not really a gas tax increase, but it is. Basically in Pennsylvania, we have a couple different types of gasoline taxes that you pay. Some of them you pay directly at the pump. They're right on the consumer. The gasoline tax that they're talking about changing in this piece of legislation is actually something that's paid by wholesalers. The way that it's set up is that when this particular tax was enacted, they felt that gasoline would never go above $1.99 a gallon. If only that were the case. As you all know, gasoline has gone up past $1.99 a gallon and has stayed there for quite an extended period of time. What the governor, the case that he's making is that he's just removing an artificial cap on the gasoline taxes, and maybe you'll pay it at the pump. He can't really be sure. And as you are all probably aware, businesses don't pay taxes, so yes, you will be paying that gas tax increase, either in whole or in part. You will either be paying all 28 cents at the pump, or if it's something that's passed on to gas station owners, they can make up the difference in terms of increased costs to other goods, so it's slightly less transparent. But at the end of the day, you're going to be paying the extra 28 cents a gallon. At this point, there was actually a vote in the Senate on this transportation plan, this $2.5 billion transportation plan. There were only 4 votes against this plan. None of them came from York County. All of the York County delegation in the Senate voted in favor of this transportation plan. Once the legislation actually went over to the House of Representatives, the members of the House, well, a good chunk of them, are much more hesitant to vote on that kind of tax increase. And part of that, I'm very happy to say, is because they're afraid of facing primary election challengers. So just as to why it hasn't gone anywhere in the House. The other part of the reason is that there are, a fair number of folks in the House of Representatives who are ideologically opposed to the idea of any tax increase. What they would like to see is different other funds be used to plug, these transportation holes, but also to force mass transit to be more efficient in order to make up for some of the funding that they get. Just to give you an idea, the 2 largest mass transit agencies in the state of Pennsylvania, one is in Pittsburgh, the other is in Philadelphia. As I'm sure you can imagine, they operate with incredible efficiency. They actually, when you look at their numbers, for every dollar that they spend, only 30 cents comes in from their ticket fees. Everything else is subsidy. So they either need to spend less money or they need to increase their ticket fees so that people who are using the service are actually paying for it rather than folks who live out here sending money into the black hole of Philadelphia mass transit. So just to give you an idea, that's probably the biggest thing that's happening right now. If that piece of legislation stays bottled up in the House until the end of the year, you can not look forward to them voting on a gas tax increase next year because it's an election year and they tend to not do anything except name bridges that happen to be falling apart. So that's one big thing to kind of keep in mind. There's some other efforts that are going on. John's going to talk, when he comes up later from the Commonwealth Foundation, is going to talk about one of the big issues that's kind of driving costs higher in Pennsylvania and making government more expensive. So I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to let him deal with that when he comes up. The other thing that I just want to touch on is 2014. One of the things that kind of gets overlooked, and I know not so much here because I've had the opportunity to come down and speak to you folks on a number of occasions, is the impact that volunteers have on election campaigns. You can spend a lot of money on candidates, and they can still end up not winning at the end of the day. But one of the things you can't buy is people who are willing to go door to door, people who are willing to to go out on cold days and put up signs. That's the kind of stuff that money can't buy. So as you start to think about what you want to do in 2014, in the York area, one of the things that I would suggest that you really give a lot of thought to is picking a legislative district, whether that be your Senate district. You have Senator Waugh, who will be retiring, so there will probably be a primary. Pick a candidate, get to know the folks who are involved in the election, and be willing to do some volunteer work to help get good people elected in Harrisburg. Unfortunately, one of the things that we see all too often is folks who really don't have any kind of real-world experience running for office, and as a result, we see what happens at the federal level when people without real-world experience decide to pass laws. But the same thing happens at the state level. We have people who are well-intentioned in what they want to do, but because they don't know how legislation and regulation impacts your daily life, we ended up with a Leviathan in Pennsylvania that's really keeping businesses out and making it a difficult place for those of the businesses who are here to want to stay here. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. And if you are thinking about running for office, I would suggest listening to Cecilia Hauser from American Majority. If you're not familiar with their organization, they do a phenomenal job not only training candidates but training activists to really be able to carry a good message and be effective in what they're doing. So I'm going to open it up for questions about what's happening in the Pennsylvania legislature. Happy to take questions about that, or 2014, any general election questions I'm happy to field.
Me?
Don't all jump up at once.
I was just wondering, when you pick up your candidates, or when you decide on your candidates, how do you look at the electorate? I mean, because incumbency just seems to be, especially in Ron Miller's district, just seems to be, you can't beat the guy no matter what you try. How do you educate? How do you look at that? And then how do you work at educating the people about incumbency? Because it seems like incumbency is just, it just takes over. I mean, it just seems you can't beat incumbency for some reason.
Well, you raise a really good point, and basically what a lot of folks don't understand, or what you don't really think about, is that however long some of these people have been in office, they have been getting free publicity, taxpayer-funded publicity. Every month, every 3 months, a newsletter is going out to someone's home featuring your representative and their smiling face with a cardboard check. It's easy for them to get that name recognition. And of course, they only publicize the things that they want people to know about. One of the things that we do to try and combat incumbency is the folks that we work with, we insist that they do door-to-door campaigning, because really the best way that you can overcome kind of the incumbent's advantage in name recognition is meeting someone face-to-face. And we kind of guide them through what does that look like, what's the most effective way to do door-to-door campaigning, how do you look at your district, what are the issues that you want to talk about. We try and help folks put together a coherent message. I mean, it's hard sometimes to distill a big issue into something that you can get across in a 30-second soundbite. And unfortunately, that's all the time that you have. Most voters have very short attention spans, so you have to be aware of that when you're putting together when you're trying to put together a campaign message and work on campaign themes and everything like that. As far as other things that we'll do depending on the race, we were involved in 2012. We challenged a 34-year incumbent. He was the chairman. We had a candidate who challenged him. He was the chairman of the Transportation Committee. He had a horrendous voting record, and it cost us $100,000 to beat him. And that was money we had to raise in addition to what the candidate raised. And I think the candidate raised in the neighborhood of $25,000 or $30,000 for the primary election. So you're looking at, and that's a cheap media market. We were actually able to do things fairly inexpensively out in the Altoona area. So you are looking at, when you challenge an incumbent, unfortunately, it is a very large financial investment. Unless they've murdered someone or something like, something bad. I mean, they have to be on the front page of the newspaper with a corpse if you don't want it to cost that much money. But yeah, you're looking at anything from, $75,000 to $200,000 for a House race. Senate races, when you're challenging an incumbent, you're looking at $250,000 to $500,000. And that's just on a primary election. Then you have to worry about spending money in the general election. So because of the size of the financial investment, that's one of the reasons that we're selective about what races we get involved with and have certain bars that we want to see candidates get over before we'll commit resources to them. Todd.
Yes.
It's a bad thing when the speaker knows your name, just in case you're...
Yeah, well... Okay, I want to go back to transportation. Traditionally, transportation revenue to support transportation has come from fuel taxes. There's a big discussion right now because we are using our fuel more efficiently, which is a good thing, but that means less revenue per mile. So then we have, proposals out there, like I believe Oregon is talking about taxing per mile driven, where the black box in your car will report to the state, okay, and then they will send you a bill. I was just wondering if you had any specific ideas for how to deal with this loss of revenue due to fuel efficiency.
So there's two sides to every equation. There's the revenue side and the cost side. Obviously, if you're going to make something balance, you got to take care of both. One of the things that we've kind of looked at, states get their money from two places. They get their money from the federal government, and they get their money from however they fund their transportation system. Federal government, primarily it's, again, fuel taxes, which receipts are going down because fuel efficiency is going up. You're getting less taxation per miles driven, the same thing that's affecting the state. For the time being, let's kind of just ignore the federal government. Our focus is really on the state-based stuff. You would, I guess, ideally, the approach that you need to take when you're funding something is that the people who are using that something are the one that's paying for it. I mean, that's just kind of the fair way to do it. So in some cases, what that would mean is if we transition away from a fuel tax, in order to replace that, we would need to look at increased tolling on various roads, public-private partnerships to make the dollars go further. If you're not familiar with public-private partnerships, there are a couple different ways they can do it. One of them is the government basically sells or it actually leases the road to a company to run a particular stretch of road. They're responsible for the maintenance and everything like that. There are a couple of different ways that they do it. Some of the companies will take that on in exchange for being able to generate advertising revenue and everything like that based on the roadway. The more common and kind of easier way to deal with it is actually something that they do in Europe. One of the things that they'll do is if you get a contract to build a road, you're actually responsible for maintaining that road for a period of 10 years or whatever the contract says. So the builder has to make sure that they are building a quality product, otherwise they're going to have to pay to fix it. And that's actually something that would probably stretch money a lot further in Pennsylvania. I don't know about you, but there are a lot of roads that they get done paving it and the next year it's potholes or it's wavy. So there's it encourages quality control. That's one of the ways to kind of stretch out the funding. When we're talking about funding specifically in Pennsylvania beyond kind of the toll roads thing, one of the things that we would want to look at is using the motor vehicle sales tax, which at this point is about $1 billion a year in Pennsylvania. The motor vehicle sales tax actually goes into the general fund. So rather than putting it into the general fund so it can kind of get used for whatever, why don't we use that for transportation? Since it's a tax on things that are being driven on the road, let's put it back into the road. Some of the other things that we would need to look at, we would have to keep some kind of per gallon tax in order to capture funds from people who are driving in from out of state. That is, unless you want to have border crossings. You know, you can only get into Pennsylvania on a couple of roads and you have to pay a toll to get in or out. If you don't have the toll, you can't leave, you're stuck. So that would be kind of an alternative. But if you keep the gallon tax, what that would actually do is it would make sure that folks who are just driving through the state, when they fill up their tank, the state of Pennsylvania is capturing revenue because of that. And for a state like Pennsylvania that has a lot of highway miles, that would be kind of an important thing. The other way to look at it, rather than actually having to do a black box, would involve, and this isn't something that we're proponents of, but this is another alternative. When you are driving a lot of like 18-wheelers, the commercial traffic are actually, they have to log their mileage. So you could actually, as the state of Pennsylvania, require any trucking company that moves freight through the state of Pennsylvania has to pay a mileage-driven fee based on their logbooks. And then the state would have the ability then to go back and audit to see if they are paying the correct amount. So, I mean, there are some ways around it so it's not quite as invasive as a black box. For, everyday folks like you and I, it would probably also include other things like increased registration fees. I honestly, there are some things that I would actually look at in order to privatize some of the roads, like completely. Realistically, when you start looking, 15, 20, 25 years out, are there certain areas where the roads that are currently in use, do they warrant state maintenance? I mean, there are areas when you take a look, particularly in and I'm not going to pick on western Pennsylvania on purpose, but if you look at the Johnstown area, Johnstown was historically, an industrial center. There was a lot of traffic and everything that went through there. It's lost 75% of its population since its population peak. And its population peak was 100 years ago. So it had a much larger population 100 years ago than what it does now. Is it fair for the state to have to maintain those roads that are no longer serving the volume of traffic that they used to? So, I mean, some of it is also kind of just deciding, sorry, Johnstown, if you want that road, you're going to have to pay for it. And really kind of devolving the transportation function back to state and local governments. so that folks who live in an area will be the ones ultimately paying for the transportation in that area. So we're going to have to look at things very differently than what we do. And beyond that, there are a lot of ways that one of the arguments for government-sponsored mass transit is that if government didn't do it, nobody would, which is an absolute lie. If you take a look at Detroit of all places, there's a company, and I'd encourage you to Google it, called the Detroit Bus Company. Before Detroit actually declared bankruptcy, they had stopped running buses throughout the city, basically. A private organization called the Detroit Bus Company actually started running buses in the city of Detroit, and they used a completely different model than your kind of your hub and spoke model that most bus companies run off of. What they did was you would send a text message to the Detroit bus company, tell them where you were and where you wanted to go. They would send you a text message back. We will be there to pick you up at X time. So it's kind of more of a door-to-door kind of model, or we will be at X intersection at this time. That would be their closest stop. So they actually manage the stops around the demand rather than making demand manage itself around the stops. So it's just a very different model. It's actually, it's less expensive and everything. So I think one more question.
Okay, last question for Leo.
Yeah, this has to do with school board elections. Have any of you read the newspapers the past couple weeks about York Suburban? About all the letters to the editor and so on. It was pretty vicious in the district. I wrote a letter to the editor, and it appeared in the Thursday morning paper about 2 weeks before the election. And that afternoon, early afternoon, there were 6 or 8 incumbent signs on my street. I guess I told Nick Pantelides and Ralph Felder, I said, I guess I'm lucky I didn't have a horse head in my bed when I woke up the next morning. But the one school board director said at a meeting, she's concerned for the taxpayers, but if it's for the children, I don't care how much I have to raise taxes. Now that's pretty bad. These school board directors, the 4 incumbents that won, the elect team, they've been there anywhere from 12 to 18 years on the school board. And over that time, taxes have increased greatly in that time. Nick and Ralph ran a good, clean campaign. The incumbents ran it on emotions about closing the pool, which the pool was open. They already spent the $700,000 to renovate it, and on closing schools. Well, the 4 incumbents that were on the board are the ones that initiated the survey for properties or facilities to see what they should do. So it was kind of a lot of fake skull doggery in there. And one thing, I worked at the Grumbacher Center at York College all day, and towards late afternoon, all these young couples showed up, and they had kids with them. I never really saw that before. I worked many times at campaigning. Nick up at Tri-Hill, and I think Scott worked up there with Nick, said, what's with the kids? We get extra credit if we come with our parents to the polls. Our teachers give us extra credit. Now, you have to know that the teachers were campaigning.
So this is actually something that's going to come in nicely with what John is going to talk a little bit about. Races at every level, particularly when you're looking at school board, less so with some municipal races, but school board races in particular, one of the reasons that they can be so challenging is that you actually have the teachers' unions in Pennsylvania essentially working to elect their own bosses. And there's basically no limitation on the amount of money that they can dedicate to that cause or the amount of volunteer work that they can dedicate to that cause. So we have gotten involved in 1 or 2 local school district issues. Last year, 2 years ago, we took out a full-page ad down in Bucks County. A group of teachers went on strike. We took out a full-page ad and published all of their salaries and benefit costs. They went back to work really quickly. So some of it is just a matter of folks kind of taking some control back. When you take a look at your property taxes, every school district property tax increase has to go through your local school board. Your county property tax increases all go through your county government. The challenge is actually getting people to take an interest in those races because they're very low profile. And to be honest with you, being a member of a school board means you're volunteering to get yelled at for a 2 or a 4 year period. So it's or more. So it's a challenge to get folks to actually do it. If you are in an area where you want to start looking at a future school board race, or you have particular issues with your local school board, start running now. I know that the election just happened, but there'll be another one in 2 years, so start now. Start going around, talking to your neighbors, find out how the district is set up in terms of how it elects the members to the school board. You have to start 18 months out if you want to win a campaign. You can't start 3 or 6 months. You need to give yourself a whole lot of lead time because nobody really thinks about school board races in particular. So just a matter of kind of raising the profile of it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Cecilia Hauser, and I am the Executive Director for American Majority Pennsylvania. We just opened a Pennsylvania office in August. It's full-time. We're in King of Prussia. I spend 3 days a week in King of Prussia, and then I travel the rest of the state training activists, candidates, Tea Party members, just like yourself. If you don't know anything about our organization, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that we train liberty-minded individuals to be activists in their community, community leaders, encourage them to run for office and teach you how to run for office. And we believe that national change starts on the state and local level. We don't want to come in and take over your groups or anything like that. We just want you all to be able to take what you're learning here at your Patriot meetings and go out into your communities and get your message out effectively. So we offer a number of trainings. I was just in State College. I did State College activist training on Saturday. I'll be in Pittsburgh this coming Saturday. And we do new leaders campaign training. That's where we teach you how to get your name on the ballot, how to communicate precisely and effectively. We teach you how to fundraise, maximize your volunteer efforts. Our activist training, we teach you how to build effective coalitions, organize effective events, raise money, hold the government accountable because they're not very good at doing that. We'll teach you how to use social media effectively, anywhere from, how many people use Twitter in this room? A few, but everybody should be raising their hand. And it sounds scary and frightening, but I can teach you, break it down, show you how to do it safely, and put up your privacy so that you can reach a whole new mass of people through Facebook, Twitter, blogs. I'll teach you that step by step. We also have a campus training where we teach college kids, homeschool kids, high school kids how to get organized and active in the political world early on. I got started when I was 18. The interesting thing about me is I'm not a poli-sci major. I didn't go to school for this. I got active at a young age. I've run for office. I've held office. I've been a field operative for a number of years, and I've run into plenty of what I call slacktivists. The folks that claim that they're activists, but you don't see them in the entire campaign until election night when you're at the party. That's when you see them. I can't stand that. So I want to teach you how not to be a slacktivist and not to be an activist, but how to be an effectivist. And hopefully, if you become an effectivist, then you'll want to run for local office and eventually state and federal. So I don't want to bore you guys too much. So that's what I do. We also have an action arm, American Majority Action. Some of you may be familiar with that. We have Freedom Headquarters, and we bring those in key swing states couple months out before an election, get boots on the ground, door-to-door, phone banking, because every contact counts, especially door-to-door. I mean, Leo touched on that. Door-to-door is the best contact with a voter you can have, whether you're running for office yourself and you want to get the word out, or there's just certain issues that you want your neighbors to be aware of that are affecting them. We can help you do that. So, any questions? So I'm excited to be here full time. We also, if you can't make it to one of our trainings, we do have them throughout the state. We do come and specifically train at meetings, so we can come in for a regular meeting time, maybe within the next year, and you guys want to learn how to use Facebook and Twitter more effectively, I can come to your meeting and teach that. I have a field staffer. Her name's Jamie Cox, and she's very good too. She's actually training at another meeting tonight, but I felt like I should be here for you guys because, But I'm not. I try not to be too boring at my trainings. I try to get everybody involved. I hate being bored and sitting through this stuff for hours and hours. So I make it fun, and it's worth your time. Trust me. All right. That was quick. So, yes. Yeah.
Your website. What kind of information do you have? I haven't been on your website.
Oh, yeah. At AmericanMajority.org, that's our website. We have a resource page. We have training manuals that we give you like hard copies whenever you come out to our trainings. But there's one on public speaking, how to be an effectivist, from writing letters to the editor, blogging, tweeting, effective campaigning. All of that's on the website. We also have cheat sheets for how to use Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest is all the rage right now. If you don't know what Pinterest is, it's kind of a collection of all things that are good. Everything you like is on Pinterest, and you pin it, so it's easy for you to access, and all the information's right there, and then you can post that to Facebook or to a blog, or pin a blog. This is all probably not making sense to any of you. So come to a training. But all of that information's on the website. But of course, it's easier when you have someone like me to step-by-step walk you through it, which you will get at our trainings. So if you want to run for office, also another thing that we're doing, we have a new leaders campaign that we're starting, where we're trying to find, you guys are the perfect breeding ground for the future leaders of tomorrow, whether it be school board or council or house, state senate. You folks are the ones that are engaged and ready to run. And if you're not ready to run, we can help you. And we also want you to help identify other people in your community. You might not realize that, your neighbor is really active in the community, and they would be the perfect person to run for a House seat. So we're focusing on making sure that you're able to recognize folks that will get out and work hard for you and represent you once elected. So, all right. Yeah, it's on, but I can hear you.
What do you suggest to people to break the mindset of, say, a particular candidate that most people like in their neighborhood? But what do you suggest for them to do in their neighborhood, and how often, and information to get out to them? I have some suggestions, but I'm curious what you would suggest to do.
Let me make sure I understand the question correctly. So for someone that's already in elected office,
yeah, let's say
that you don't agree with them?
I know a candidate that's trying to run against an incumbent.
Okay.
And the people in the community like that incumbent just because they know the name.
Right.
How do you break that?
Well, I think that the best thing to do is look at their voting record. See how they're voting, whether it's locally on certain issues that affect your taxes, or whether it be a state issue. Look at how they're voting. We work a lot with Heritage Action. So they have scorecards for, and so we go and for an example, I don't want to call out anyone, but I'm from out the western part of the state, so I'll pick G.T. Thompson. People love him. He's from Clearfield. People adore him. He's so friendly. He's so nice. My dad ran for state senate, and he was a huge help to my dad's campaign. But then I was talking to Heritage Action, and they said, have you even seen his scorecard, how he's scoring? And he has a horrible, horrible score. And nobody even knows, but they keep reelecting him because he's just a likable guy. So I hate to say this, but I mean, the people, we get the legislators that we deserve because we're not educating. So all of you guys, you're in tune, you know what's going on, so it's your responsibility to get out and educate your neighbors. So door to door, writing letters to the editor, that's the best way to bring some light to that situation and show that there is a better option. And if there isn't an option, maybe you or someone you know will stand up. My big thing is, whether you think that you can win or not, I always suggest primarying anyone. It scares them. My dad ran for state senate against Senator Wozniak and lost by less than 2% of the vote with the help of CAP. But now Wozniak's voting a little bit better, and he's reconnected with, you know, the people he's representing because we scared him. So even if you don't win, it's worth just stepping up and scaring these guys into getting back to why they are there to begin with. So hopefully we can teach you do that. So.
Yeah, Cecilia, look at this group.
Yes.
What's not here? What do you see missing?
My age. That's
Young
so
people,
sad.
Young people, exactly.
I know.
And my question is, how do you bring young people in? And you get around to a lot of groups. Do you encounter groups where young people are showing up, where young people are interested? And, you know,
sadly not. This is a theme throughout the entire state and throughout our country. I think it's fortunately, I have 4 siblings, and they're not as involved as I am because they have families and they're running businesses, but I've kind of devoted my life to making sure that I'm getting at least the information out to the young folks. But getting involved with social media, Twitter, Facebook, blogging, that kind of starts the conversation with them. And, you know, you have your phone. I always have my phone with me, like it is attached to me 24/7. I'm always on Facebook and I'm always on Twitter. So if you can engage younger people that way and kind of just plant the seed. Fortunately, I had great civics teachers and a very politically active family, so it kind of just fell into place for me. But I mean, I start up conversations with my friends on Facebook and Twitter. I'm like the token Republican. In Ebensburg, where I'm from, it's 3-1. I'm like, it's horrible, but you know. But I'm the token Republican, and everybody likes to fight with me. But I don't fight. I just effectively get out my message without angering people. And then they start to think a little bit, and then you can get them more involved. Also, Friday night, a long meeting. What kind of young person would want to go to that? So, you know, except for me, because I'm crazy. But, Leo.
What has more of an impact on an elected official, hearing from a constituent or talking to a lobbyist?
That's tough. I think lobbyists, they tend to listen to more, even though that's not necessarily correct. But we need to bug these people. We need to email them. We need to go to their offices. We need to make phone calls. We need to write letters and keep reminding them. Also, there's an opportunity where you can go and lobby for a day, and we can help you learn to lobby so that you can go do it yourself. It's a shame that they don't listen to us, but it's our job to hold them accountable because, you know, they're working for us. So if we don't like what they're doing, let's fire them or let's primary them. Let's scare them. And you folks are those people. All right. So, yes.
On the libertarian, I mean, you're talking about young people, so we always hear about young people being more on the libertarian side.
Yes.
Do you ever contact those type of? I mean,
Yes, we do. Like I said, as long as you're, limited government, conservative, friendly, we'll talk to you. We'd love to train you. I deal with a lot of libertarian college groups. I do campus trainings with them. College Republicans, I do campus trainings with them too. So I try to encompass everybody. But the thing is, we got to rally the troops, get on the same page, and fight towards things that we can actually make a difference and affect now. We need to be working towards that. So that's hopefully what our trainings will do for you folks. But AmericanMajority.org. I have my cards in the back, some information on our new leaders pledge cards, so you can sign to either run or recruit a candidate for us to help train and convince to run. So if you want us to come to a meeting, let us know. I'd love to train you and bore you some more. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. John, I guess you're up next.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Bouder. I work at the Commonwealth Foundation. I'm a policy analyst and communications officer. And while that is my day job, I'm actually coming to you tonight as a representative of another organization. I hope that's okay with everybody, but it's called the JBEA, and I have got an awesome deal for you guys. For a small annual fee of just $669, you can join this organization I've started that advocates for the best interests of people like you. You want to join? Don't worry about writing a check. My close friends in state and local government will gladly collect your fee for me. They will take money out of each of your checks, just like taxes, bundle it, send it to my bank account, all free of charge. But wait, there's more. In exchange, I promise to advocate on your behalf, although about 45% of my fee will cover overhead costs, and my $257,000 salary, as well as luxury conferences and golf outings that I need to attend to run this very important organization. Oh, and I'll use much of the rest to fund a variety of partisan political activities and lobbying for causes that I believe in, and I'm sure that are best for you as well. Have different beliefs and values that I do? No problem. You can always opt out. But I'll still take $450 from your paycheck. You've got to pay your fair share. Oh, and I'll also be sure to let your colleagues know that you're not much of a team player. So you don't want to join or pay anything at all? I understand. That's your free choice. Henry Ford once said that you can choose any color car you want as long as that color is black. Well, in Pennsylvania, you can refuse to pay my fees and keep any job you want, as long as you find that job someplace else. Now, in the real world, this sounds like a pretty rotten deal, doesn't it? Although the JBEA, and that stands for John Bouder's Employee Association, although that's fictional, the Pennsylvania State Education Association, or PSEA, is all too real. PSEA President Michael Crossy, for example, does in fact make $257,000 a year and doles out teachers forced union dues on his union's pet left-wing political projects. Unfortunately, the majority of Pennsylvania's public school teachers have little choice but to accept the PSEA's rotten deal. The PSEA and its sister union, the Pennsylvania Federation of Teachers, or PFT, aren't just spending teachers' dues money on educational issues for teachers and students. They're spending it on lobbying and political activities, trying to raise your taxes, prevent long overdue pension reform, keep the government in the booze business, and block school choice. None of these activities are in the best interests of anyone except for the powerful government union bosses themselves. The PSEA even spent $21,000 of Pennsylvania teachers' dues money to support the recall effort of Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin. On top of this, our teachers are forced to contribute to the National Education Association, or NEA. And my apologies for the union alphabet soup, but there's even more coming. The NEA takes teachers' money and donates it to such divisive organizations as ACORN and even Planned Parenthood. Not only are teachers forced to pay for union politics, all of you are too. How? Taxpayer-funded payroll systems are used to collect union dues and PAC contributions and send them to union headquarters. The money is deducted from teachers' pay before they even see their paycheck. Skeptical? You don't have to take my word for it. Teachers across the state are speaking out about this unfair and exploitative system. How would you feel if you were forced to pay for a political cause that worked against your own beliefs and values? Outraged? Victimized? Just plain angry? Teachers are no different. For example, Chester County science teacher Robin Faught says, quote, "I resent having to pay dues to a union that I do not support or need. To my surprise, our school district resources, as well as my tax money, are being used to deduct not only union dues, but political action committee funds that go to candidates that I do not support. Even our regular union dues fund organizations that many of us disagree with," unquote. But one of the union boss's favorite lines is that members' dues money can never be used for politics. They say dues are separate, and only teachers' voluntary PAC contributions, above and beyond dues, are used for political purposes. The problem is that just isn't true. John Kress, a math teacher in Lawrence County out in western Pennsylvania, explains how it works in a recent radio interview. He says, quote, "There's hard money versus soft money. The soft money, that's what our dues are used towards. That would be like the flyers, the emails, the campaigns to basically say, vote for this candidate as opposed to that candidate," unquote. Additionally, grassroots get out the vote efforts and phone banks are often both funded with dues money and staffed by union representatives. I believe this is what someone who asked Leo a question was talking about. Union dues keep school boards that are ineffective in office. Last year alone, the PSEA reportedly spent $3.2 million of workers' dues on political activity and lobbying, according to their own reporting. You can find all this online. They're required to issue reports every year. Their political action committee donated an additional $2 million directly to candidates. Thankfully, voters overwhelmingly oppose this behind-the-scenes, taxpayer-funded infrastructure that exploits teachers to promote union bosses' political agendas. A recent survey of likely voters revealed that nearly 80% of voters and even 75% of union members agree that unions should not be permitted to use taxpayer-funded resources to collect union dues. It's really common sense. People get it because no other private organization or political group enjoys such financial privileges on the taxpayer's dime. No other organization exerts such political control over supposedly free citizens and employees, and no other organization has done more harm to the teaching profession either. That's why John Kress is taking a stand. He says, quote, "I should not have to prostitute my beliefs and values to teach." He says, "I refuse to do so," unquote. Keith Williams teaches English in the Conewago Valley School District just down the road from here in Adams County. Keith says, quote, "We are forced to pay a private organization to keep our jobs. To me, it's basically extortion. Pay this private entity or lose your job," unquote. Rob Brough from Lawrence County teaches history and reading. He says, quote, "The NEA and PSEA's agendas and political ideals are counter to what I believe, and it is a kick in the teeth every time my dues are withdrawn from my hard-earned paycheck and handed off to some organization I would never contribute to of my own free will," unquote. Rob goes on, quote, "For example, ACORN and Planned Parenthood both received NEA money, which comes from teachers' union dues. Both of these groups are what I consider to be unacceptable recipients of my money. I would never support a group that engaged in voter registration fraud and pushed for housing loans to underqualified borrowers, as Acorn was proved to have done. I also have no desire to fund Planned Parenthood, a group that provides abortion. I have a 3-month-old premature granddaughter who was a candidate for abortion, but we did not give in, and she is the apple of our eye. It is a recorded fact that the NEA did in fact send money to both of these groups, unquote. Now, teachers' unions are the largest of Pennsylvania's government unions, but they're far from the only ones. There's that alphabet soup I mentioned, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and I won't try to pronounce that acronym. There's the Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, UFCW, among many, many others. Combined, they spent another $1.6 million on lobbying last year in Pennsylvania, and an additional $2 million in PAC expenditures. You've probably seen some of these government unions' political ads purchased with funds that taxpayers like you helped collect. Earlier this year, the UFCW spent more than $1 million on TV and radio ads fighting liquor privatization, and they bragged about it. The most ridiculous example of their ads shows a young girl laying a flower at her father's funeral, and it claims that privatization will result in skyrocketing drunk driving deaths, a claim that was debunked and ridiculed by numerous sources, and it made national news for its absurdity. Union leaders representing government liquor store managers even lobbied against transportation funding to try to thwart liquor privatization this spring, leaving their brothers in the private sector construction unions hanging out to dry. Elsewhere, in the heat of the Philadelphia schools funding crisis, the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers ran attack ads against both Democrat Mayor Nutter and Republican Governor Tom Corbett. The ads repeated false information that Governor Corbett slashed education funding by $1 billion. On our massive $47 billion public pension liability, the PSEA denies the problem and lobbies against common sense reforms like transitioning to a 401k plan. Their opposition falsely claims current teachers would see their retirements cut under this reform. At the national level, union leaders spent an incredible $1.7 billion on lobbying and electoral politics over the last 2 years, according to the National Institute for Labor Relations Research. With that kind of money, it's no surprise that 11 of the top 20 federal political donors are unions. And what are they pushing nationally? The SEIU was one of the primary advocates for Obamacare, and now they're asking for a waiver. And with the rivers of money collected for them by states like ours across the nation, they're likely to get it. Other states have identified the problem and have taken steps in recent years to end the unfair practice of automatic dues deduction and enact paycheck protection laws. For example, Washington, Idaho, and Wyoming require unions to regularly get written consent from workers before employers can deduct political money. That's not ideal, but it's something. Utah stopped state government from collecting any funds used for politics from workers' paychecks. That's a bit better, but the state is still collecting unions' funds for them for free. Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin have gone further, prohibiting various levels of government from collecting union dues and PAC money at all. We at Commonwealth Foundation believe Pennsylvania should be next to Wisconsin on that list, because no one should be forced to pay for politics they don't like, just like all those teachers gave testimonials about. It's time to end the forced collection of political money and protect the rights of Pennsylvania's teachers, workers, and taxpayers to use their hard-earned income for the causes they believe in, not those dictated by union leaders. Wisconsin enacted this reform in 2011, simply leveling the playing field between government unions and their employers, the taxpayers. The result? Just one example. The Wisconsin Education Association Council's lobbying expenditures went from $2.3 million in 2012 down to $83,000 in 2013. A drop like that in Pennsylvania would break down the barriers to common sense policies that we've been advocating for decades. Policies like pension reform, liquor privatization, prevailing wage reform, business tax cuts, and school choice expansion. So, in conclusion, what can you do to help make this happen? Let your friends know that their taxes are helping unions advocate for the left-wing agenda. Let your kids' teachers know that you don't think they should be forced to fund a union at all, or forced to fund union political activities. Sadly, many teachers still believe the union propaganda that their dues don't fund politics. Finally, let your legislators know that you think automatic dues collection is a flagrant misuse of taxpayer resources and that you support paycheck protection laws. Thanks for having me and for your attention. All the teachers that I quoted here are from a project of ours called Free to Teach, which you can find out more about at freetoteach.org if you're interested, or if you know any teachers that are like-minded that might be interested. So, any questions?
Just so I'm clear on this, your understanding is this has been going on for so long. Is it the fact that there actually are no legal precedents to act upon these, what to us seem obvious? Is that what it is? They've not passed any laws to say this is illegal and therefore we have ground, but just it seems to me we talk about these
John, can you
common sense ways.
reiterate the question, please, so people can hear?
The question was, have there been any legal challenges to this, or how this seems like it should be illegal? Why isn't it, essentially, right? Well, it is illegal for most people, except for government unions. Private sector unions can't do this. Private individuals can't do this. You'll see Pennsylvania's sort of famous for corruption and a lot of using public resources, politicians using public resources to further their political campaigns. For instance, the Justice Melvin, who's recently been in the news for being sentenced for doing this. This is essentially what government unions are doing. They're just allowed to do it. No one else is. It doesn't make sense. There are legal challenges to this on the national scale. There's one in California right now that could go to the Supreme Court, depending on what happens. And if the Supreme Court ruled on it, then it would affect all the states. But what we can do as an individual state is to just change the law in our own state. So you're right, it doesn't make any sense, and it should be illegal. Does that answer your question? Okay.
The only way to remedy this is to get these clowns out of office. If you look at the financial records of a lot of these guys, Seth Grove, he's taking money from the teachers union. These people gotta go. It's what Cecilia was saying. If they're doing something that we don't agree with, we gotta get rid of them. So look, I urge you to get on, look up your representatives, see if they're taking money from the PSEA. I'll bet you they are. I know Stan Saylor does. I know Seth Grove does. They're bought. They're paid for. They're not going to get rid of a law they're not going to stop something as simple as stopping the automatic deduction. They're not going to do because they've been bought already. So the only way to remedy this is to get people in there that won't take the money from them, to get these clowns out and put new people in. But this requires a lot of work, a lot of grassroots effort, because they're entrenched. And what did you say, $100,000? About that. To get someone out, or a good grassroots campaign, which is boots on the ground.
And that's true. It is an issue that crosses party lines. Unions will donate to both parties, and so what's created is a government party versus us, the taxpayer party. So it's not just a partisan issue.
I have a question and a comment. I work with and against the federal labor relations boards, and I've thrown out unions and helped form a union at one point. But we've had past president had an executive order that ordered all the political officials to partner with the unions. I think that created a lot of damage. And you have, at the state and the federal level, you have the government officials that go into negotiations. It's all secret. Nobody else knows what's going on. And they're negotiating. It's not their money. It's taxpayer money, and they don't care. And so I was going to ask you, but I think it was covered by the last question. You know, it's the politicians that have to be held accountable, and this is at the school board level because they're in negotiations every few years, and they can give up whatever they want. And it's all the federal labor laws allow them to negotiate things that wouldn't otherwise be legal. Like you mentioned, it only affects the public. So the question I had was, you know, I wanted to ask you back with the partnering with the unions. You know, how much damage was that a turning point in leading us to where we are today? If you thought Bill Clinton's executive order to partner with unions helped us to get where we are today.
Well, I think the problem stems further back than that. I know the law that allows this to happen in Pennsylvania was enacted earlier, and government unions or government workers weren't always allowed to organize into unions. It was President Kennedy, I believe, that allowed that to happen, and it's a policy that was opposed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt because he said it would stop government from functioning. And, you know, decades later, he was very right about that. So it's a long-term process, and this is one step in the direction of taking back control from, because the taxpayers are sort of aced out of this negotiation, like he was explaining, because the government unions negotiate with the politicians, but they're also donating to the politicians, and they're using somebody else's money to give to them. So, of course, you know, it's like a cycle that never ends. It's a power cycle, essentially. And breaking that cycle, this reform of ending automatic dues deduction, or also called paycheck protection, we think would end that cycle and stop the out-of-control spending both at the state and the national level if it were enacted there.
But the only way you're going to get that done is if you throw the bugs out and replace them with new.
You mentioned that it was pretty easy to get a hold of PSEA publications of their contributions to the politicians.
Yes, there's a online resource that sort of houses these reports that unions are nonprofit organizations, so they're required to file reports with the government specifying how much money they're getting and what they're spending it on. So then they're searchable, so you can search through and you can see the salaries of union officials, and you can see what their expenditures and revenues are.
Is that information on the Commonwealth Foundation website? Or?
Specific information is, we probably have a link to where you can find that if you want to do your own research as well.
The Department of Labor they file. The unions all file financial disclosure forms on the Department of Labor website, which isn't particularly user-friendly. But some of the articles that Commonwealth Foundation puts on their website all has a link usually to the source, so you can pull it up.
Yeah, and you can find a pretty detailed analysis of this at commonwealthfoundation.org/unions. So it's pretty simple. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to once again thank all four of the people that were up here to give us all the information that they did. So let's give them a... to not talk about elections already, but who was not happy with some of the outcomes of the election this general? Okay. I wasn't completely happy. There were some elections that I did like locally. I personally backed Flannelly, and I had an email sent through the 912 site asking for participation, some help. I didn't put any information about what candidate it was because I didn't want it to look partisan. But out of 650 email recipients, we got 5 responses. 3 of those actually helped. Now, I know not everybody was for Flannelly, and that's fine. But what we're looking to do is we're trying to get people involved. We're not a, what's the term? This is not a spectator sport. We come here because we're looking for information. Beyond that, we need to do something to move people forward, to get politicians out, to get people who want to help in. So that requires us to get up, get out of our happy place, and do some work. Out of about 5 or 6 of us, we personally handed out door to door about 2,600 leaflets door to door, which is a lot of work. There's about 152 precincts in in York County. It requires a lot of people to do that. So what do we do going forward? Well, does it make a difference anyway? In 2008, I looked at the statistics for, let's just say, Todd Platts. He's a local guy. Everybody knew him. In York, New Salem, that's where I am a precinct committee man. He got 70% of the vote. York-wide, 65% of the vote. So he got about 5% more in my precinct. Now let's go to 2010. That's a year after I was a precinct committee man, started walking around, handing out information. People know me now. I come out door to door. I tell them who's running, what's going on. I even give them the ballot so they know before they get to the door or to the polls. They love it. So 2010, it shifted just a little bit. 73% in New Salem, 72% overall in York. It's 1%. New Salem was voting for Platts. Come to 2013 for the primary. I shifted those numbers quite a bit over a couple years because people started to know who I was. They appreciated what I did, and they started to trust my information because they were looking at it and they were reading it, and they knew what I was telling them. I did an 18% shift in the Republicans away from Platts, 11% on the Democrats. And on the general election, I got 18% more votes for Flannelly than the rest of York County. So it works, and it's easy. It really is. It just requires you to walk around, hit the doors, tell the people what's going on. You can even knock, tell them who you are. At first, they're going to think you're a politician. They're going to say, who are you? What do you want from me? You tell them you're a committee person. What's that? The next election, they find out, oh, yeah, I remember you. Oh, okay, yeah, I might read that. The third election, they're thanking you. You're walking away from their door. People open up the door. Hey, thanks, Ed. Appreciate that. So they do appreciate it. They do want it. They need it because just like everybody else, they're busy. So what we do is we get the information out to them, to the people who can't do it, who don't have the time. So the next step, January, our next meeting, what we're going to try and do is get the information out to you to tell you how to run, what positions are open, how to do it. It's simple. All we got to do is teach you. You can go do it yourselves. And then we can start taking those seats back. So, one last thing.
The T-shirts. We have 4 in the round. We have 4 Stop Common Core T-shirts, so we don't want to stampede at the end of the meeting. But $10 if you plan on going to the meeting on the 21st. Please grab yourself a T-shirt. They are bright yellow, and you'll stand out and call attention to yourself. And then you had the raffle.
Yes, the raffle. The raffle is for the embroidered, what do you call that?
It's like a quilt square.
Quilt. And
Has a pocket hanging on the wall.
Bill, would you like to get somebody to grab a number out of there? Because I don't trust Beth. Anyone? Anyone?
You think I'm honest? Yeah. And it's my number.
Okay, 699.
Yes. That's
Okay, come on. 853. 853.
Do we have a winner?
Come on.
Right over there.
All right, there we go.
Oh, one last thing. Somebody had mentioned getting the information out to people, trying to alert the youth. The other day I was on Facebook. A friend of mine posted how, he didn't mind paying 50% in taxes if that actually helped people in the community. That kind of hurt a little bit, but it was the subsequent postings that kind of bothered me. There was a young lady who was putting herself through college, going for a second or third degree, and she thought it was okay that she was going to take food stamps. So I asked her, why is it my fault? Why do I have to pay if you choose to go for more degrees? She went through a bunch of different reasonings, and when I slammed every one of them, she finally jumped off that Facebook posting. But it makes a difference. These people think that they're entitled to this. They've been told they should be entitled to this. They tell each other, their friends, they're okay with it. Somebody needs to tell them it's not okay. So every time you get a chance, let them know it's not okay. All right? Okay, thanks everybody. See you in January.